Hello again, everybody. Today we're going to do a lesson that goes into transcription and translation, which is actually the next step to knowing the basics of DNA. And I'm going to try and break it into two lessons because it's actually the most complicated thing that you'll have to do in the biology curriculum. Okay, so before we do that, I want to actually review what we should have learned thus far. So if you'll take a look at the picture at the left, obviously we know this as a DNA molecule, and its full name is deoxyribonucleic acid. The Na tells us that it's a nucleic acid, which means it stores genetic information, and the deoxyribo part is the sugar that is in it. Okay, we keep DNA in the nucleus. Some cells keep an extra copy in their mitochondria and chloroplasts, more advanced ones. Okay. The two parts of the backbone, which are the two different colors of blue, are the sugars and phosphates. Remember, they alternate. The sugar is the pentagon, the phosphate is the circle. The four bases are A, T, C, G, and they pair just like that, A with T, C with G. There is a hydrogen bond that holds the two strands together, and then when DNA needs to copy itself, it is actually called replication, because it ends up being an exact copy of the original strand. Okay? All right, to continue here, if this is one side of the DNA strand, what would the complementary strand be? And guys, all you have to do is remember the rule. Apple turnovers, collard greens. Okay? So here would be the matching bases. And I know whoops, I messed up, didn't I? That should be a T right there. Okay? So TAAGCC. Oh, I missed a T. That's what I did. ATG. Okay? If the DNA strand contains 40% thymine, what percent is cytosine? Well, remember, thymine pairs with adenine, T and A, so that means the A also has to be 40%. So 40 plus 40 would be 80, and that means 20% is remaining. So 10% would have to be C, and the other 10% would have to be G. Okay? I've seen both of these, or I've heard on the EOC lately, so that would be a good thing to remember. Okay? What are the subunits of DNA? These are nucleotides. And then where does replication take place? Obviously, it has to be in the nucleus if the DNA is in the nucleus. Okay? All right, so we're at a little bit of a disadvantage here because we haven't gone over cell parts yet. Remember, we're doing everything backwards. I thought that was the best idea at the time, thinking we'd all be, back together like normal, but we're not. But you may remember some of this from middle school, which is good. You already know that DNA is in the nucleus, right? And then, if you remember, a ribosome is actually what makes proteins. So they're like little protein factories, and they carry out the instructions that are given out by DNA. Okay, but I have a question for you. If DNA stays in the nucleus for its own protection, okay, and the ribosomes are the little factories that do what the DNA says, how does the ribosome get the instructions that it needs for that particular assignment? Okay? The DNA doesn't leave the nucleus and head over there and give it to them. The ribosome doesn't enter the nucleus to get its instructions for the day and come back out. So what you actually need is sort of like a little messenger boy. Okay? So normally if this was in person, I would do a little skit with you guys. I would have somebody come sit in the front of the room, that's the Queen of France, and I would have somebody else come sit on the other side of the room, that's the Queen of Spain. Okay? So I want you to think back, 15, 16, 1700s. How did we actually get messages from one queen or king to the next? It obviously wasn't cell phone or calling them or texting them or sending them a snap, right? It was by a messenger. Okay, so let's run through the skit, pretend like we're doing it in person. So the Queen of France stays in her little castle, right? As most kings and queens do. They rarely leave unless it's to make appearances, and then they're heavily guarded and all that kind of stuff, okay? Well, also, you may have learned in history sometime or another, most kings and queens weren't necessarily the most intelligent people. They could lead very well and sometimes not very well, but most of the time, some of them could even only sign their name. Okay, so they had to have a person write down, like they would dictate everything to a person. So do you remember what this particular person is called, it's a scribe. So this person is normally very intelligent, highly regarded by the queen, heavily relied upon, and it wrote down all the messages for the queen. Okay? All right, then we have our message written down, but we have to get it across different countries. So the queen is not going to risk her very intelligent scribe to go across country. So what they usually do is hire this person. Someone who's unfortunately usually expendable, will do anything for their queen or king for some money. And if you'll remember, this person is actually called a messenger. Okay, and that's very important. It's going to be one of the terms we need in a few minutes. Okay, so let's say our messenger makes it over to Spain and he hands the queen or her people the message. Well, since the message was actually written in French, she needs somebody to interpret that for her, which what you need if you're changing languages is a translator. Okay, so then the translator would give the message to the Queen of Spain, and she would make her decision based upon that. Okay, so let's say the Queen of France was sending a threatening message that says, if you don't hand over X amount of land by the midnight of whatever date, we're going to attack. So the Queen of Spain has two choices, right? She can either hand over the land or she can fight. Let's say she chooses to fight. So in response to reading the translated message, she's going to build an army. Okay? So I want you to kind of think of this actual skit here as we move along. Okay? The Queen of France stays in her castle. She dictates a message to someone. This person delivers the message to the translator. They can't quite read it because it's not in the same language. And then the Queen of Spain makes a decision based on that particular message. Okay? And this will make sense eventually. All right, so that little messenger in terms of DNA is RNA. Okay? So instead of it being called deoxyribonucleic acid, it is just ribonucleic acid. Now, some things are similar. Okay? It still has the phosphate. It is still a nucleic acid. It still carries genetic information, okay? But the main difference between them are DNA is double-stranded, RNA is single-stranded. Now, this gives it an advantage because with it being a single strand, it is half the size. So therefore, it can snake through the nucleus and head over to the ribosome, okay? Like we said a minute ago, since it starts with an R, the sugar is ribose, not deoxyribose. And one other change here, if you'll notice, remember I've been drilling into you, ATCG, ATCG. RNA does not have the T. It has a cousin to the T called uracil. So I just want you to remember the U. Think of maybe hey you. I'm not sure, okay? But the pairing is still the same. A pairs with U just as A paired with T, and the C and the G do not change. Okay, so because of its single-strandedness, it can leave the nucleus and head over to the ribosome to deliver that particular instruction. Okay? All right, so the process of actually turning DNA into RNA is called transcription. So that's where I wanted you to think of that scribe that was writing down the Queen's message a minute ago. Okay? We are writing down the instructions that DNA wants to carry out into RNA. Okay? So if the DNA strand said a T, then RNA would be written down as an A. Opposites, just like in replication. The only exception is when you want to pair it up with a T, you have to write a U instead. Okay? So here's an image of that. I want you to think of this purple wiffle ball looking thing as the nucleus. The blue double strand, of course, is DNA. And this yellow single strand is RNA. And RNA is created directly from DNA in the nucleus. And we'll get further into that in the next lesson. Okay? So there are actually 3 types of RNA that you'll see. The mRNA literally stands for messenger. Okay? So that's like our little guy going across country. Single-stranded, headed over to the ribosome. Okay? The tRNA is called transfer RNA. I like to think of this as our little translator. And it kind of looks like this T here, which kind of helps me remember it. And it also reminds me of a coat hanger for some reason, okay? I want you to think of this guy as like a waitress, because what he or she is going to do is deliver this particular amino acid and put it in the right spot. Just as you would expect a good waitress to put your meal that you ordered right in front of you and not in front of anyone else, okay? And then the third type is rRNA, and that is actually the ribosome itself. So when we go over cell parts, it's just going to look like dots, like the cell has chicken pox. But if you can zoom in on it really close, it actually looks like this double piece unit here. Okay? So I think that's where I wanted to stop today, but I do want to go to this part here just to kind of review. Okay, DNA and RNA, 2 strands, 1 strand, a different sugar, 1 nitrogen base is different, and remember y'all, the phosphate group is the same. Okay, so if I had you draw it out, it would look the same. Then when you turn DNA into RNA, the term for that is called transcription, and here are your 3 types of RNA. Okay, so let's review this real quick. So let's compare DNA and RNA. So let's do the basics that you absolutely know. DNA is obviously double-stranded, correct? So that means RNA has to be a single strand, okay? Remember, in the backbone, the phosphate remains the same. That doesn't change, okay? And this should be easy to remember since DNA starts with a D, the sugar is deoxyribose, and since RNA starts with an R, the sugar is ribose. All right? So let's do the nitrogen bases that they have in common. They both have an A, they both have a G, they both have a C. Okay? DNA has the T and RNA has the U. Maybe you can remember that because they're very close to each other in the alphabet. I'm not sure. Okay? But just remember the pairing is still the same. G with C, T with A, and then when you're making RNA, you're going to have to write a U instead. And we're going to practice that some more of that tomorrow, okay? So the RNA can head to the ribosome because it's a little messenger for the DNA, and then the DNA needs to remain in the nucleus for its protection. So think of the DNA remaining in the castle, just like the queen did, okay? All right, so guys, I'm going to stop from there, and I'm going to try to post some notes for you also along with this video. Please, if you have extra time, I would kind of look at other random videos like comparing DNA and RNA, looking up transcription and translation as we get deeper into that. But I promise this is the hardest thing, and I was hoping we'd be back together because of that. And I know it's hard doing the hybrid thing or the completely virtual thing, and I get that. So we'll get through it, okay? Just put a little extra study time in, do a little extra research if you need to, and we'll make it, okay? If you guys have any questions or concerns, always feel free to email me or call me, okay? Have a great day.